Hello and welcome to episode number 78 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. My name is Mark, and with me as always are my two co-hosts, Neelan and Kellen.
Hello.
Hello.
On today's episode, we are going to be talking about shiny, flashy things meant to attract you. We're talking about gimmicks. Gimmicks in games, gimmicks we like in games, gimmicks that are gimmicks alone, and what we're left with are not so great games.
And if the podcast had a gimmick, who would it be?
Who would be the gimmick, or maybe what would be the gimmick?
Who would it be?
We'll leave that for the fans to vote on, I think, on the Patreon. That's a Patreon bonus. Vote on the gimmickiest of the hosts. But before we talk about gimmicks, let's talk about the games that we've played. Kellen, what have you been playing?
Yeah, so it's been a fairly light week for me as I traveled home to hang out with family, but we did get Bärenpark to the table. This is a game we played at Gen Con last year, and I had not purchased it actually until the Miniature Market Amazon Prime sale. I'm not sure how everyone had a sale for Amazon Prime Day, but so in the Miniature Market sale, I got Bärenpark, I got a couple of Keyforge decks to try out the new expansion, Age of Ascension. I got Mansions of Madness. So I've got a couple things percolating that I'm excited about, and we played Bärenpark. Bärenpark is a polytetramino.
Yeah, Palomino,
Tetramonomino game.
Although actually though, for what it's worth, tetramino strictly means 4 squares only, so I guess Palomino is more correct.
Don't do this.
Sorry.
And you are building your Bärenpark. It's adorable. It's very cute. And I really like it. It's probably my favorite in this light genre. I like it a lot more than Patchwork. Neelan was nodding along until...
Well, I mean, I was going to say, have you played Indian Summer yet, bro? Because...
I still haven't. But you got your koalas, you got your different bears, and then you've got your toilets. And those are the one
Toilets
square.
really cinch it in.
Yeah, if you can't do a better move, you have to take a toilet, which I love.
Yeah.
I unfortunately try-harded the game a little bit because the Blue Tank and my brother were... like looking up Brother Bear music videos the whole time. They were trying to get us in the bear spirit, and I just destroyed them in score. But Bärenpark is such a light, pleasant, fun game.
And there's an expansion for it coming up very soon.
I know, I'm excited.
It's one that I haven't played yet. You guys both now talking about it glowingly. Yeah.
I should keep bringing that because it's good.
It's just cute. It's just there's nothing offensive about it.
But it's also a good, solid game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the setup takes a little too long. There's a little bit of like the first player to use this tile gets 6 points, then 5 points, then 4. So it's a little onerous
fiddly in that way.
And there's a lot of like stacking tiles on boards up front, and
Yeah, but it's somehow more than the sum of its parts, I feel like. So I also, as mentioned, tried the new set of Keyforge, Age of Ascension. So I bought 4 decks for that. So Neelan and I are going to try some at Gen Con, I believe, but also played a game with my brother. I've just had wonky games of this every time I've played it. Mm-hmm. This game ended with my brother having 9 creatures out on the field and me having none, about a quarter of the way through the game. And there was no way for me to wipe his creatures, so he was reaping 6 ether per turn. And you only need to reap 6 per turn because then you turn those into Keyforges and then you beat Kellen in a spectacular fashion. So Keyforge is the Richard Garfield unique deck game where each deck is completely different. And what makes that so hard is at the end of the game, me and my brother sort of said, well, was my deck better than your deck? Mm-hmm. Or did you play bad? Or did I play really good? It's very unclear and hard to parse without just running it back, without just switching decks. It's an enjoyable time, you know, sitting there opening the decks, looking at all the card art and getting through it. Like, we had fun, I guess, but it was sort of, what did I do wrong?
I've seen some people on our Discord who are Keyforge fans talk about some sort of like ranking system.
Yeah, so the idea is that you sort of, if you're logging your games using their online system, your deck gets a certain rank that you accumulate over time, and then there's actually a whole handicap system built into the game. It's like, okay, I'm playing this strength deck versus your strength deck, so I get a 2-chain handicap or
That's
something.
based purely on the wins losses of a deck?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay,
I don't
so
think
it's not like
way...
you can run the cards.
No, there's not like some sort of procedural determiner of its rank. I don't think so.
I think the tournament structure of playing multiple games where you swap the decks
that makes sense.
is really cool. It takes too much time probably, but I like that in a competitive setting. But I still think the best use cases of this is just open something up and go, and you don't even know what you're looking at.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's the way I would always prefer to play it. But it, like you said, it just seems so at odds with this idea that every time you finish a game, you just, without playing those decks repeatedly, you could never know whether it's just up to the relative strength of the decks. And that's frustrating because it's not a game where I think the joy for me would be in playing the same deck over and over again.
And then the last game I wanted to talk about, I decided that we could play it live right now.
Okay.
This comes to us from the Looney Lab, makers of Zendo and the Pyramid Arcade. They have a new release that I'm showing to Mark and Neelan right now. The game is called Are You a Robot?
Yes.
It is no, don't do that. A social deduction micro game. So this game comes with 3 cards and a basics. So here we go. We are being replaced by murderous androids who look just like us. Each player will get a random card which they look at, but they can't let anyone see. Gameplay consists of talking, asking each other questions to figure out who became a robot. Players can say anything. Lying is part of the game. For the 3-player game, the game will end when a human player points at another player and says, "Zap." If they shot a robot, the humans win, but if they shot a human, the robot wins. The robot cannot shoot.
Okay.
That's the game.
Human can shoot.
Well, there are 2 humans,
Sure.
1 robot. Only the humans can shoot. Better shoot a robot. Remember, lying is allowed.
Okay.
Take a card, 1 of 3. Look at your card. Oh, that's good. So now we start with true and false questions. Mark, are you a robot?
I am not a robot
Why are you not a robot?
because I'm flesh and blood. I sit here before you, flesh and blood. Cut me.
Well,
I
I'm
will bleed.
convinced.
I'm not convinced. I think that you were like booting up while the rules were being explained, which is why I had to explain it twice. And I'm very tempted to zap you right now.
Right.
So I would think
That's
quick
big
on
talk
your
coming from
feet.
I see your like wires coming out of your ears there, so I'm not sure where you're coming from. Are you a robot?
Absolutely not.
That was a very long pause between absolutely and not, Kellen.
What are you talking about, Neelan? Actually, Neelan admitted he was a robot before the game started.
I didn't have my card yet.
I think
I don't even know if South Africa produces humans.
Yeah, barely functional
Is it
robots.
Chappie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do the Chappie voice.
Sorry, Chappie.
You can do it better than that, you little liar. Look at him. That's how I know. He does this voice all
You
the time.
saw Chappie. That is not a convincing robot.
He was cute.
He was cute.
Anyone can make the move.
I think it's definitely shoot him. You got to do it.
See, look. No, he's saying shoot him. Got to do it.
Oh, because
he can't do
he
it.
can't. He has no gun.
I think we shoot him.
Well, but
Oh, he can't. See,
He can't look.
zap.
Oh God. Damn it. Oh God, I couldn't shoot. I wanted to so badly. I was the robot. I was shot by the humans. How did you?
Well, it's basically because you didn't shoot Mark.
What do you didn't? No one shot.
It was kind of like I felt fairly convinced. The fact that you weren't directing anything to me at any point was like, well, I don't know. I kind of felt like you were just trying to get me to zap Mark. Is basically my reading it. Which, yeah.
That's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So this is the newest game from Looney Labs. It is remarkably similar to
Yes.
Win, Loser, Banana.
One Loser Banana Second Edition.
And Win, Loser, Banana is, I don't know, whimsical in a fun way because you get to be the banana. But in this game, you get to be a robot.
That robot inability to shoot is
It does change it. Yeah, that's the crux.
Yeah.
So that is Are You a Robot? Make sure that's logged. Wait, no, I lost. Don't log that. Maybe we'll have this at Gen Con if anyone wants to come up to us and play a quick game of social deduction and hopefully beat Neelan. He thinks he's the best shadow.
I am the best at social deduction. I think it's proven at this point.
If we re-record it 3 times, make sure you win the game to keep up with the lore. I guess you can win best shadow, Neelan. There's a 2-player game, which I think is even closer to.
Windows Banana.
Yeah.
There's a 2-player version of it?
Yeah. The players gain the option to shake hands and trust each other. Robots can't shoot, but when they shake hands, they don't let go. Well, that sounds fun. That actually sounds scary because you go for the shake and then they go for the power grip.
Right.
So those are the games that I played this week.
I played a couple games myself. The first was Wingspan, the big Stonemaier game.
And this is the first time you're playing.
No, I've played it
okay.
once before. I played it once before. Yeah, it's a beautiful game. Everybody who knows the game knows that. I found myself getting a PAX Premiere, read the card flavor text sort of thing going there. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with flavor text now.
And birds.
Well, no, you're the bird guy.
No, you're the bird guy. You're the
bird guy?
You're the peep mutts and
right.
Picaroo.
That's true. That's true. I do have an affinity for birds. Pikoko, yes. It's very smooth. I don't know if I would call it a gateway game. I was trying to figure out as we were playing, like, is this for all its production, and it's very inviting to new players because of how well produced it is. But it seems like a gateway plus game. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I would introduce it to non-gamers, but yeah, it's a beautiful game and I enjoyed myself. The other game I played is a new Target exclusive game from Ravensburger. This is Jaws, the co-op game. Well, it's actually not a co-op. Sorry, it's a one versus many.
Are they paying you on the side?
Target?
Yeah.
I was figured that like I need to supplement the patron income on my own there a little bit on the side, but no.
Do you know how an LLC works, you dumbass?
So this is the one versus many game where one person plays the shark. What was the shark's name in Jaws?
Sharkington.
No, it was not that. It was like
I've never seen it.
You've never seen Jaws? Have you really not ever seen Jaws?
I only saw Jaws for the first time like 6 months ago.
It holds up.
It actually did.
I feel like it holds up.
It does actually.
Because it's not about like the shark. It's about like
the real monster is man.
Oh, it's the monster inside of you?
That's right. That's right.
Oh, you sold it to me.
Take on it. So yes, I played the shark. I am terrible when I'm the one in the one versus many games, and this was the same way. So it's a 2-act game. The first act, the shark is trying to eat swimmers around Amityville? No. Amityville, yes. So in the first part of the game, the shark is sort of in the same way as you do in Scotland Yard or
Spectre Ops.
You're writing down your movement and you're trying to eat swimmers while the townsfolk are trying to get you. They each have powers. So yeah, it's just like sort of a guessing game, bluffing game. The shark has powers himself and
like lightning bolts.
Not quite. And then this act ends when the shark is either tagged twice by the players or eats 9 swimmers. It's one of the 2 ways that Act 1 can end. And based on how many swimmers you eat, you get a number of power cards for the second act. So if you eat a lot of swimmers, the shark will get a lot of power cards and the players will get a few equipment cards. I was found out very quickly, so I didn't get very many power cards. And then you switch to Act 2. The board flips over and...
Wait, sorry, real quick. When you say found out, you don't know who the shark player is in the first
No, you do.
Okay,
you do.
Never mind.
I was tagged twice.
Got it.
They stuck barrels on me. Yes, twice. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Which is their goal in the first act. And then the second act happens, you flip the board over, now you're on the boat where the final scene in the movie takes place. And the shark player is trying to either sink the boat, eat the entire boat, or destroy the entire boat, I should say, or eat the players.
Or he's a hidden traitor shark.
There is
he
no
wants
hidden
to help.
That's right. A second shark appears. Mm-hmm. While the players are trying to kill him, obviously. The player's only win condition is to kill the shark. So the shark can like eat parts of the ship, and it makes it harder for the players to move around it. Unfortunately for me, I had done so poorly in the first phase. The players were very well equipped to deal with me, and I was killed, I think, by a harpoon gun, tragically. But it was a fun time. I'm not one usually for co-op games. Maybe because the adversarial nature, maybe because I was the one versus the many, I had more fun. But I think everybody who played it had a good time. And for a mass-produced game, I think you can do a lot worse if you're looking for something with a sort of like party vibe, because, a lot of people have seen the movie. There was a lot of like flavor text with lines from the movie, and I made everybody read
Shark
them.
in the water.
That's a classic line from Jaws. So everybody had a good time, and I think, again, you could do a lot worse than Jaws. Found at a Target near you. Neelan, what have you been playing?
I played Fuse recently. This is a real-time cooperative dice game. The premise is that there's a deck of cards and a bunch of colored dice. So I think there are 5 different colors of dice. They're standard dice otherwise from 1 to 6. The cards sort of have some sort of combination of dice that they need to fulfill it. So you might have a little greater than sign in the middle. Says you must have a red die that's also greater than a green die, say. And those cards are in the middle. So you start the game with a couple of cards, and then when it's your turn, and this is all happening in real time, and I think about a 5-minute timer or something like that, you grab as many dice as there are players, you roll them all, everyone drafts one of them real quickly, and then you place them on your card. Whenever a player can't place a die on their card, it goes back into the bag, and everyone has to lose a die of the same number or color as that discarded die. And this is just happening, as you can imagine, it's very frantic. As you're placing dice on these cards, the places that you're able to place them get more and more restrictive, so you sort of have to hope that you're sort of keeping spaces open for a bunch of different options. You don't want to put yourself into a corner where there's only one specific die that you need.
Though, when you do paint yourself into a corner and the die comes up. And you're like, I'm taking it.
Yeah, exactly. That's mine.
I need the one yellow.
Right. And that's one of the most fun parts about it is, as you roll the dice, you see the couple that you need. And normally there's a sort of gentle co-op nature. Oh, I could take this. And then sometimes, like you say, you're just like, nope, that's it. That's mine. No arguments.
Yeah.
And those moments are fun. It's a very simple game. That's about all there is to it. You sort of have to work through the deck of cards before time runs out. This is very reminiscent of sort of other real-time dice rolling games where there's just a franticness to it and just the action of sort of digging into a bag, rolling dice, and trying to do it quickly while still thinking about the puzzle of it is really, really fun. There's a fun element I liked a lot, which is that you have to grab and roll the exact number of dice without looking into the bag. Otherwise, you sort of have to put them back. Trying to sort of do that blind is just funny. And yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about Fuse. It's a really fun, it's a really simple game. I'd recommend it. I feel like the couple of times I've played it, it's gone over very well. Yeah.
Yeah, I've played this a couple times with non-gamers and they've absolutely loved it.
Right.
Yeah, just the timer element of it and the franticness, everybody screaming is always a great thing.
And there's a version of this in the Pandemic universe, right?
Yes.
Pandemic.
Another Target exclusive.
Mark.
Target.com for all your shopping needs.
We're getting no money from them, Mark. Please.
But eventually we might.
Stop.
They keep
doing
listening to this.
That's right.
Yeah,
the checks will keep rolling in.
They're like analyzing the audio of all podcasts.
Right.
So they hear for
Target,
the
yeah,
keyword.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
And now they're going to pay us.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's the hope.
That makes sense. We were playing Fuse together. I reminded me of when we played Project Elite.
Yeah.
Except the setup took 30 seconds instead of a half an hour. And Project Elite has so many systems and subsystems built onto it. And it kind of made me question if I got 70% of the fun of Project Elite with 2% of the overhead.
Sure.
And then I thought of the hundreds of dollars of Kickstarter Project Elite that I have coming. And I wondered if I'd made a poor life choice.
Yeah, there's actually another game that Kane Klenko, is that the name of the guy who did both Fuse and this Pandemic Rapid Response, called Flatline, which is another game in the same sort of thing, which I had for a while. But sort of to your point, it was sort of like the fun of Fuse, but with a lot of layers on that seemed to be detracting from the thing. It like lost the purity. So I traded that away almost immediately, whereas I still have Fuse. All right, before we get into the glitz and glamour of Gimmicks, we are going to read a review. What, you got a problem with glitz and glamour?
No, this is not a gimmick of our podcast.
Oh, reading reviews?
Yeah.
One thing, as always, that you can do to really help out the show is to rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts or Facebook or wherever you find the show, or tell a friend. If you think about it, if you review our show on Apple Podcasts, you're telling a number of friends. So it's sort of like a multiple way of telling friends. So maybe just review us. That's all we're asking. This review comes from Burrs83, the best of the Burzes. They say, "This is a fantastic podcast. I always have a smile on my face as the hosts banter and pick on each other about game preferences and tastes. At the core, BGB is like sitting around a board game table with your friends, joking and chatting about games. Definitely worth a listen. Biblios is awesome."
You added that last part.
I did not. I'm reading Burz's words. Burz,
is it there?
Yeah, let's move on.
Neil,
definitely not in this
part of the
review,
show.
Mark.
Gimmicks. Gimmicks.
Putting words in our listeners' mouths.
Gimmicks are great.
Wait, Mark.
Okay.
Previously, Mark, you made a declaration that you would do anything for the podcast.
Some might call it
or
a
the
declaration
Patreon,
of independence.
including taking off your clothes.
That's true.
And I have
That's why I'm in the nude right now.
an announcement to make.
Oh, God. I'm very scared. Kellen is literally unbuckling. This is terrifying.
Okay. All right. Well, let me get the camera out.
This is one for Patreon.
Okay. Well, Kellen has revealed orange.
Orange tank
orange
underwear.
There you go. Wait, what was this bet again?
I don't know.
Can we make it again? Can we go double or nothing?
What?
What it prompted you to disrobe? This time?
Very confused.
Yeah.
You said
Yeah.
the previous episode that you would take off your clothes for the Patreon backers.
I said that in the previous episode?
A couple episodes ago, yeah.
Okay.
So I found the shade of orange that corresponded to Neelan's tank color
Right.
and purchased
This is
boxer brief.
This is a show of solidarity.
Totally.
Okay. And then Neelan, your turn.
I'm about to sit down and reveal my red underwear.
Neelan?
I know.
Well, okay, so then I get to wear green?
Perfect.
That works
It
out.
goes in a circle.
You guys?
It's the circle of underwear.
Yeah, but if he wears orange,
that's
and you
right.
wear
I have to
red,
wear
so I
green. Yeah, no, that's fair.
Do we want to put a picture up on for the patrons on Lens?
I mean, it would double our income.
That's right. Look, I'll stop doing Target ads if you do that. Let's talk about gimmicks. What are gimmicks?
We know what the new gimmick of the podcast
That's right,
is.
yes.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, there was some talk before we recorded about what exactly a gimmick would be, and we weren't sure if we were all on the same page. And doing research for this episode, there are a lot of different sort of avenues people have taken when they discuss gimmicks in board games and just what a gimmick is in general. Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe we'll go around talking about what we were looking for when it came to a gimmick in a game. For me, it came to something that was probably superfluous. It wasn't necessarily. Sometimes it aided a game, sometimes it helped a game, but seemed to be there primarily to sort of set the game apart, something to like catch the eye. Mm-hmm. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was superfluous and not necessary. Sometimes they do enhance the game experience, but that was the biggest thing. So like an eye-catching, like a selling point.
Yeah, I feel like the games I found were sort of games that run the gamut of being either superfluous or actually pretty much core to the experience, but we're definitely that. We're like the one-line elevator pitch selling point that you could be like, this game has this, right. And then someone's excited from when they hear that, or when they see it.
The first thing you think about when you...
Exactly, or the first thing you would see if you saw the game on the table. I did definitely lean towards the physical. Until we spoke about this before the episode, I hadn't considered the idea of like a mechanical gimmick per se, but yeah.
For me, gimmick has more of a pejorative attached to it, I think, whereby if a gimmick, whether that's physical or, almost all of my gimmicks are physical as well, but I feel like I use the word gimmick when I'm describing something that doesn't need to be there, but it is there to be flashy or showy.
Okay.
But if it becomes core to the experience or becomes like there's no other way to administer that experience, then in my mind it would no longer be a gimmick. It would be just a mechanism or core to the experience. And that's probably not the strict definition of gimmick, but every time I've heard someone say that's gimmicky, it's always a little bit of a neg.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's true. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start talking about them. I'm going to start with sort of maybe to counter Kellen's point. Games with a gimmick, it's like an immersive, the pieces become your playing surface sort of thing. So what I'm thinking about when I talk about this are games like The Adventures, what is it, Temple of Chak?
I think Temple of Chak was like one of the standards.
Yeah, there's another one, but it's a game where you sort of have like an Indiana Jones setup where you're entering like a temple and you're grabbing loot, but the spaces you're on sort of start to get covered by these big stone blocks, so it's sort of like a bunch of toys that you're playing with. In one of them you have a rock that rolls at you,
like,
again
literally like Indiana Jones boulder.
Right. Another one would be Cleopatra and the Society of Architects, where the board becomes the temple that you're building together. The box gets flipped upside down and you start adorning the box with these things that are your goal in the game, is you're sort of trying to build parts of this temple, so the box becomes this big grand temple. And then finally Niagara, one of the older games, where the box becomes the river and the end of the box becomes the falls, and you have the surfaces that you're moving your boat on sort of slide down the board turn by turn, and you can get thrown off the edge of the board, thrown down the falls.
So Niagara I had on my list, and this was a question for me. One of the things that Niagara has is that the waterfall splits into two.
Right.
And when you push the line of canoes, either the left side or the right side will go over the falls. And that is a literal mechanical aspect of the game, because you just push and then one of the two goes over the edge due to gravity, due to friction, due to which pushes which. And that's not something that... I mean, I guess you could recreate that really easily with a deck that has a random 50-50, or you just roll a die.
Right.
But something about it felt so like physical, and in the sense of it actually, because the box is elevated, these canoes literally fall off the board, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
But that's a gimmick.
Right.
You talked me into it.
Okay. What do you guys have for gimmicks?
One of the ones that comes to mind, these are not actually games I've played, but I've always been very intrigued by the cube towers in Shogun and Wallenstein. Like, I guess they're used to simulate battles in the game. Is that the idea? Yeah. So as you sort of have a battle, you'd place the cubes on the top, and depending on which cubes emerge from the bottom, would determine the outcome.
Victory, yeah.
That always struck me as a very, very cool idea, and it certainly lives up to the idea of a gimmick in that that's the only thing I know about those games, and I want to play it because of it.
Sure.
Have either of you played either of those?
I have not. I have Shogun. I still haven't played it.
Okay.
You also have the Cube Tower in Amerigo. Have you played Amerigo?
No.
Okay, this is like a Feld game.
Okay.
Where you drop cubes in a tower, and based on the cubes that come out, those are the actions available to people per round.
Oh, that's
so like
interesting.
I think it's like the way it works is like blue may be movement or whatever. So you drop blue cubes in during that round, and so most of the cubes that come out will be blue, but some other cubes will come out, and based on the number of cubes, that's how strong the action is. So, during a blue round, maybe like you have 4 blue cubes and you can use that most efficiently. But if you want to do something else, if a green cube or a brown cube come out, you can still use it. The uncertainty of a cube tower has always been a big draw for me. That's always seemed like a cool way to do it.
And then another game I have on my list, which is also a cube tower game in a different way, is Mord Arosa.
Oh, yes.
So this is an interesting one where the premise is that you're supposed to be dropping cubes into the tower and listening to how far down the building they go. So you have a couple of victim cubes that get placed earlier in the game, and you're trying to find those by saying, so this tower is made up of 7 tiers that can be lifted independently. So you might drop a cube in and be like, okay, I think that there's a blue cube in floor 4, and then you lift it up, and then whether you're right or wrong, either those cubes get counted as negative points for whose player they represent, or they just get seeded back into the top. So it's this constant game of sort of listening to the way cubes are falling and trying to figure out which colors, based on which people have placed into the tower, where they've ended up. Right. It always seemed like a very silly game, because having played it, it's fun, but that also struck me as like the definition of a gimmick to me, because it just seems like it doesn't quite live up to the premise as you describe it.
I am putting my foot down and belting my pants up. Neelan,
yes.
This game, by my definition of gimmick, the preferred definition, this seems like a ripe time to do it. Like, when is it a gimmick and when is it an innovative game mechanism? Because in this instance, you
couldn't do it
right. When you talk about Shogun, you could put all the cubes in a bag and do something weird, pull out 3, put 2 in. With this, the game, quote unquote, is listening to how far down something has fallen. And it's obviously silly and dumb, but...
Yeah, no, I guess it's a matter of definition, right? Because to me, the idea of a gimmick is if the game itself doesn't offer anything more than that principal mechanic, than the gimmick mechanic, that is sort of like, that is my definition of what a gimmick is.
So it's not even a game, it's a gimmick.
It's barely a game so much as just this one single gimmick.
For a long time, Mord Arosa was the game that I brought when I came to new groups. I'd be like, you guys think you've played board games?
Right.
You ever played a listening board game? And I'd pull that one out. That was like my go-to, try to impress game.
And it's definitely like, it's impressive from that perspective of just being a game that like, you've probably never played a game like that before.
Right, where you have to listen, yeah.
Someone brings up nyctophobia, it's over.
Colin, got any games?
Yeah, so my examples are, I think, a little bit more specific, a little bit more things that feel superfluous that could be done in a easier way, but they exist anyway. Camel Up is the first thing that comes to mind. It has a dice pyramid, and you put 5 dice in it, and then you flip it over, and you get to use a little fun push button
That button is great. I love it.
One die comes out.
Yeah.
And, there's been 2 versions of the game, and both versions have this. You know what else you could do to do this? A bag with the dice in it. And you take one out, and it actually would probably be easier, and it would be easier to load them back in.
Right.
But that's not how we're playing Camel Up. So to me, that is a quintessential, easy one to say, that is a gimmick. El Grande, we talk about it a lot, but has the Castillo. You could just have a bag and put the cubes in a bag, but because you're putting them in the big black tower, it's mysterious, it's exciting, and you're kind of listening to them drop into the tower, and that makes it more exciting. Strike is another one where I feel like the board game box as a component is gimmicky, where the arena, the box in Strike, you're just rolling dice in a bowl. It's silly, and it's dumb, and it looks like a little arena. Perhaps one of my favorite board game gimmicks is in Sheriff of Nottingham.
Oh, okay.
So in Sheriff of Nottingham, you are trying to steal from the rich and give to the needy.
Yeah.
I don't know. And you are trying to smuggle goods past the sheriff. And so you put those goods in a little cloth bag, and then you hand it to the player who's the sheriff for the round. And then the only rule of this negotiation is that if the sheriff snaps open your bag, it's over. They're looking in your bag. So until that point, everything is kosher. So you are smelling the bag. You're kind of running it through your fingers. That's Neelan. You're kind of looking through the light, and you kind of pretend like you're going to unsnap it. But then if you unsnap it, that's when serious business has happened. That's the point of no return.
Right.
And what I love about this is that you could just hand someone a stack of cards. There's so many other ways to do it, but the bag brings new light, brings new silliness
Gives it
to
like
the game.
tactility, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier like a pejorative nature for gimmicks. So do you have like a negative feeling about the gimmicks that you've brought up so far?
I mean, I think it's one of those, if I like the game, I like the gimmick. And
Sure.
if I don't, I kind of roll my eyes. I was thinking of the Euro game Via Appia.
Okay.
Which has this, similar to the classic arcade game where you put a quarter in it and then there's a pusher.
All right.
And then,
I remember this.
And then it pushes whatever it pushes off of the edge, you get those resources. So via Appia, literally you have different size resources and you're putting them in a little thing and then you get to push. And then any resource that falls off, I think you get it as points.
Right.
And it's like, when someone is explaining it the first time, I'm like, wow, this is different. Like, what the hell is going on? But then there's so much, depending on the gimmick. In this case, how hard can you push? Can you, can you flick it? And so it doesn't end up being that important, and it's an element of adding in randomness to the game. So in general, the gimmicks I've listed I enjoy, but I do think, there are examples where I end up rolling my eyes. Card crafting.
Right.
Okay, as a genre. It's fun and interesting, or dice crafting. Let's talk about dice crafting.
Forge.
Yeah. Dice Forge is definitely something I had on my list as a good example. Yeah.
Battle Bones also, yeah.
Because Dice Forge, even specifically, could be done as a deck builder or as because I guess if the probability resets every roll, a bag builder, right? Like literally a bag builder. And yet being able to take off those faces of the dice, upgrading them and rolling them, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that is the game.
Right.
So yeah, would Dice Forge be a good game without those dice?
That's the thing, is I probably wouldn't, right? Because everything you just described, like turning it into a card game, turning it into a bag game, doesn't sound fun to me, like as a descriptor, right?
Yeah, I think what you said that I like is this idea that if it's just the gimmick, if it's just the gimmick, then we can use the word gimmick. If the game is the gimmick, but if the game is an amalgamation of the gimmick plus other mechanisms that sort of coalesce and that makes it something more, then suddenly that gimmick really serves to highlight unique and interesting experiences in the hobby.
Okay.
But it's hard for me to use the word gimmick at any positive.
So what's a really good example of a game that you think is very fundamentally elevated by its gimmick?
I don't know if you would even call it a gimmick, but one of the first games I thought of was Alchemists.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that, actually.
It's right on the verge of being a gimmick. I mean, I guess the app integration is maybe pervasive enough now that you might not call it a gimmick.
But something about the combination of the app and the physical component.
Right, exactly. The way that you
Yeah.
scan the cards makes it feel gimmicky, and that's fundamental, and I think elevates the game. It
You're
makes
right.
it like one of my favorite deduction games for that reason.
The first one that comes to mind to me is Tzolk'in. Like, it's a
Of
game.
course.
I mean, I love Tzolk'in. Obviously, I've ranted about it a lot at various points. But yeah, at first glance, you would look at the gears on the board. This game has physical plastic gears that interlock, and as the years advance, you're rotating these gears. You could look at that and be like, okay, this is a dumb idea. But it's so integral to the actual central system in that each of your pieces, and there are a lot of them on the board at a given time, advance every year, and that's how you plan your strategy. So if you were to do it without the gears, you'd have to be picking up pieces and moving them every 2 minutes, and that just seems absurd. Like, I don't know how the game would exist in a practical way without it. So something that seems extremely gimmicky on the surface has a much bigger, very developed game built around it.
I think it's hard, and once again, some of this comes back to a definition game, but I think that giant minis is a gimmick.
Could be, yeah, absolutely.
Cthulhu Wars' gimmick is giant minis, or even a pasted on theme. I think in many ways I would consider the theme of Secret Hitler to be a gimmick, because a lot of the way they sold that game was, hey, Cards Against Humanity crowd, do you want to shout at each other and accuse each other of literally being Hitler?
Right.
And so that is gimmicky.
Yeah.
Even licensed IPs, how far is the Jaws game thematic enough to get around? So you could define a gimmick in a lot of ways.
Sure. Your big miniatures talk reminds me of the most absurd gimmick that I thought of, or one of the most absurd, is the Council of Four, which is funny because it's a tale of two gimmicks, because the original Council of Four had a gimmick where when you added somebody to the council, one of the people got literally knocked off the perch.
Oh, they were like elevated.
Yeah, it was great. Which is a great gimmick. It was like a nice tactile sort of thing. But then in the Cool Mini or Not version, the gimmick is that each player has their own mini that has no functional purpose in the game other than to show who you are.
The one game that I seem to disagree with the internet on, and hopefully they had this in South Africa, Neelan, is Mousetrap.
I have this as an example on my list of, again, the definition of a gimmick game.
And I can't abide that this game is a gimmick. I guess under the definition that the only mechanism in the game is the mousetrap, and everything else is
everything else is terrible.
But the game, like, there is no game without it.
Right.
So it's so central.
Have you ever played Mousetrap the right way?
I don't even know if absolutely. Okay. Yeah, when I was a kid, like all the time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had the game, but I always just make like a messed up version of the trap. Right. You know, like I do my own like little mouse, but I never learned the actual.
I was 100% the nerd that was like, no, guys, we're not going to have fun playing this game. We're going to play it properly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
What about Don't Wake Daddy?
Oh, I don't know that.
Oh, I loved that game.
What's that? It's like a bed, right?
Yeah.
Like
the dad's in bed. No, and you're like sneaking to the fridge to go get food.
Okay.
But like you make more or less noise, and then you have to like either hit this button, and then dad will wake up randomly, and then you have to get sent back to bed.
Gotcha.
I feel like I can't get through this podcast without talking about Star Trek: The Next Generation, the interactive VCR board game, A Klingon Challenge. This is...
You've played this?
I have played this.
Neelan was his colon games again.
Yeah, not only just the best title of any board game ever. So a funny story about this. When I first came to the US,
seeking this game.
Yeah, we came especially
pilgrimage.
For this. Yeah, exactly. When we first came to this, my brother and I, my older brother and I, are big Star Trek fans, and especially at that point in time, that was just like the height of our Next Generation like fandom, which is ironic because it's probably 8 years after it actually aired in the US, because it was just brand new on South African TV. Obviously, we went to Toys R Us, and my brother sees this board game, is like, oh my God, I have to have this. And we loved it when we played it here. As soon as we got to like a friend of my parents' place, we're like, oh, we're going to sit down, we're going to learn the rules, we're going to learn to play this. It's kind of incredible. One of the things that happens is that you're playing the game live while a video is playing. Okay. And the premise is that Klingon has taken over the ship and they're flying to like their homeworld to start a war. And you're sort of traveling around the ship in real time. And every time the Klingon comes on screen, you have to like stop what you're doing, tap your badge and say, yes, Captain Kavak. And if you don't, you have to get punished by the other players. You're all working together because it's kind of a cooperative game.
Okay.
It's a weird, great thing.
Okay.
And he gives nicknames to specific people. What a game. Brilliant. I actually played this recently.
Did you
what?
really? Okay.
I did. So, funny story. Again, my brother probably still has his copy back home. One of my best friends happens to have this game, and she was just like, oh yeah, I wasn't even a Star Trek fan, but my mom found this game that I apparently had when I was younger, and she said, do you want me to send this to you? I was like, yes.
Okay.
Yes, have that sent immediately so we can play this. It's not a good game.
Oh, it's not. Oh, man.
No. Okay. I still think we should do it sometime, because I want to watch Kellen play this so bad.
Kellen say yes, Captain what?
Yes, Captain Kavak.
Can I try it?
Nope. I don't say this word.
Do it for patrons.
I'm a dignified man.
We're going to live stream this.
That'd be great. I'd be all for it.
I know nothing about Star Trek.
Even better.
I don't think you have to know anything about
Nope.
Star Trek. You don't need the lore. You ever played one of those VCR games?
No.
There was, Nightmare?
Atmosphere was the
Atmosphere,
big one,
that's one, right. I remember for sure playing this football one where, you play the game, but then if you like rolled the go to the tape die, it would tell you like the next part to click, and so you play the next scene, which was like a scene from a random football game, and it wasn't even an exciting like play necessarily. It was like a play of a running back like running 3 yards and getting like tackled immediately, and then that you'd have to recreate that on your board. But it was like you're queuing up the tape and you're like all excited, and it's just like a 2-second play where a guy like falls over. It's so boring.
Wait, but how does it work in a VCR? Because I played DVD like Trivia Pursuit, but a VCR starts in point A and goes to the end.
I think the way was you just stop after every clip, or maybe it told you like a time code. I don't remember exactly.
It just like, wouldn't it be the same? Every time you reset,
right? You just hopefully not play it, which was the case with me. I just did not play it very often. So by the time I played it again, I'm sure the tape was like stuck somewhere in the middle, and I just played where it was, but it was not a good game. Okay, so let's talk about just our general feeling about gimmicks in games. Do you see them as a positive, negative? When you see a game that has something that's clearly identifiable to you as a gimmick, how does that make you feel about the game? Maybe just on a first blush.
I totally understand the reasoning from a design perspective, right? Like, because as the game market gets increasingly saturated, you want that. I mean, that's the idea of a gimmick, right? It's the big central, it's the grab, it's your marketing sort of thing, your flash, right? So I understand the temptation for designers to try, and when I've sort of played around with the idea of backseat board game design, it's like, what is the next big mechanic, the next big gimmick I can come up with? Sure. It's an appealing thing. It's like sort of come up with a central thing and then try to maybe loosely build a game around it. Like card crafting, for example, we mentioned, feels like that. It's like, it's a neat idea, but the game hasn't coalesced around the mechanic yet, as far as I can tell. So I definitely understand the appeal, but I do wonder if, you see a lot of the more seasoned designers, like Knizia, for example, doesn't strike me as someone that necessarily does super gimmicky games. Like, they seem to be these collections of mechanics that he's just very good at refining and bringing together. So I don't know. I do think I have this loose idea that gimmicky game design is less pure, less good, but I'm not quite really there, because as we've made abundantly clear throughout this episode, there is something appealing and exciting about a gimmick. We get excited talking about them. We get excited playing them and showing them to other people. So I'm definitely not immune to the idea of gimmicks as being a powerful force in game design.
I have to also admit that if I see a game where it's like sold on the gimmick and it's clearly sold on the gimmick, I can't help but worry that there's nothing left in there.
It feels a little bit like a snobbery thing, kind of, right?
Sure,
because you just think, I'm above this gimmick, but they're definitely appealing.
Yes.
They definitely work.
When you spin Volkar's head around in Fireball Island and send fireballs down, it can't help but smile. But one of the things I was doing for research was looking through the BGG Top 100. And you can argue that it's not representative of the best games or whatever, but there weren't many games on the list that jumped out as being gimmicky. Okay. So I don't know what that says about quality of games versus gimmick. I mean, El Grande with the Castillo, but that's sort of incidental. It's not one of the first things you think of when you think of El Grande.
Sure.
The same way, when you're thinking of like Fireball Island, you think of the gimmick. Mm-hmm. With Castillo and El Grande, it's more of a like, it has this also, but you think of the area control, you think of the gameplay. It seems like a secondary thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a distinction somewhere, and my definition is stricter than your guys's, but like, for example, Hanabi, one could argue that the unique selling point, the thing that the one sentence description is that, well, your cards are faced the other way and you can't see your own. Mm-hmm. And that is not, in my opinion, a gimmick in any way. It's the game is great, it's fantastic, and it's integrated around the idea that the information you have is 2/3 of the information available, and that everyone has a different 2/3.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you could argue that's the unique selling point. You could even say that's the marketing gimmick, as opposed to that's the gimmick of the board game itself.
Right.
Juxtapose that to the game that you guys spoke about, I think, last week, Planet.
Yes.
It's the 3D Planet where you're, magnets and you're putting different sides on it. And, does that game exist without a 3D planet in the middle of the game?
Right.
And the answer is probably not after 5 plays, after 10 plays, where Hanabi, in my opinion, has stood the test of time.
Yeah, that's fair. And Planet's interesting because the planet side aspect, the magnetic planet thing, is certainly a gimmick, but it does change the way the game is played. So it is also integral. It doesn't feel like necessarily tacked on, but it is clearly a gimmick. It is clearly something that is meant to draw you to the game. So that's going to do it for our talk about gimmicks. Maybe if you're on the Discord, maybe you should join the Discord if you're not there, and let us know a couple of your favorite or least favorite gimmicks.
Is taking my pants off a gimmick?
That was certainly a gimmick. That was certainly a gimmick. That did not draw me into...
Wasn't mechanically strong.
Yeah.
People have been saying that to me all my life.
And that's going to do it for the show. So as always, you can find us in any number of ways. A quick heads up that next week, being Gen Con week, we are not going to have our regularly scheduled show on Thursday, but we will be recording shows at Gen Con. And we would love to have those shows recorded after playing games with you guys. So if you're going to Gen Con, join our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Get on the Gen Con 2019 channel. Let us know you're coming out there, and maybe we can meet up and play a couple games, and we can talk about those games on the recordings that we'll be doing at the show. There'll be probably 3 days worth of recordings, I think.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of Between the Sheets and a lot of consumed gourmet.
It's crazy to me that Between the Sheets seems like such a fundamental bit in our show.
Yeah.
But the Gen Con episodes are least downloaded, and it makes sense. But like, you got to go back and listen to the Gen Con episodes to get the Between the Sheets reference.
At the very least, yeah, go back and listen to the intro and outro of the first Gen Con episode. It's quite something.
So if you're going to Gen Con, join the Discord, let us know, or email us, get a hold of us, because I really would love to play games with you guys. I'm sure the Kellen and Neelan echo that sentiment. In addition, you can find us on Patreon. We've got a Patreon at patreon.com/boardgamebarrage. You can find us, as always, on the various forms of social media. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're everywhere you want to be.
You got it.
As always, you can find us at boardgamebarrage.com, which links to the Patreon, to the Guild, and to the Discord. So if you want to find us, go to boardgamebarrage.com. It's probably the central hub. And that's going to do it for the show. Thanks, as always, to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. And that's going to do it for the show. We won't see you guys next week, but we'll see you next week in 1 day from now.
And hopefully we'll see you at Jet.
Yes, absolutely. See ya.
Neelan's always looking for you.
Yeah, I'll be, just watch for me on the edge of the convention hall. Lurking.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay. Well,
I love that you found the exact shade.
I
was practicing disrobing earlier today.
It shows. That was very smooth.
I was like, how can I make my belt sound the loudest? I'm not lying. Do we have enough for the outro?
I think so.
Well, I'm just saying you can't cut the part where I take off my pants.
I mean, I think our reaction to you taking off the pants is going to be plenty for the outro. The audible. I think the listeners will get how visceral a moment that was for us. That was a hell of a moment.
Okay. We're good. Call it.